Welcome to Home, where faith and family meet. This is Father Tim Donovan, and we continue on our reflection with friends. Today, I have on a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time, Father Brandon Dang. He's currently the Vocation Director in the Diocese of Orange, but we went together to seminary for like 6 years together. So I know all sorts of things. We won't share them right now.
Yeah,
Anyways,
exactly. Different
welcome,
podcast.
welcome, different podcast.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, Father Tim. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful.
This this time must really change your ministry too, right?
Hmm.
Like I know that a lot of people would come to things, right, and come to
Right.
meet you and things like that. And I think probably since we're not doing a lot of that anymore, it's probably changed the way you reach out and changed the way that you
Sure.
interact with even the seminarians, right?
Yeah, and that's quite fascinating, actually, is kind of delving into that creative aspect of, our world and our life, and just seeing what other ways can we be able to outreach, to people out there that are, reflecting upon their vocation, and it also presents as challenge because a lot of times, through the personal interaction, that's how things develop and things are really brought to light there. So the challenge would be is because we don't have that personal interaction there, which presents its difficulties, but it's not impossible, right? And so yeah, it definitely is. Let's just say it's been quite the experience, an eye-opening experience, especially for my first year on that as
Right.
well, because I'm still trying to learn um, what this office really entails, and also just being able to get the way of just how seminarians are going about their life, and supporting them and discerners, and what does the whole year entail. But of course, with this pandemic, it kind of threw everything in for a loop, but nevertheless, it doesn't prevent us from being able to outreach them. So I would say that would be kind of the cool aspect of it, is trying to find creative ways to be able to outreach to our seminarians, but also to our discerners as well.
And maybe one of the gifts of this time for folks discerning religious life is to kind of have the time to do that, right? And have an
Hmm.
opportunity to slow down for a second. I think that for me, this time of quarantine has been a big reset button on a lot of things. Like I got so
Sure.
busy with my life, and just because I kept
Right.
saying yes and yes and yes, and all of a sudden the world said, no. And it was like
Sure.
this reset button that kind of helped me realize, like, man, I don't have to be that busy to be a disciple.
Mhm.
Like I don't have to just like run myself ragged all the time to be
Right.
faithful, And so it's helped me in my own vocation even to be like, oh, what is this whole thing about, anyways? And
Yeah.
being a
Yeah.
priest,
Amen for that.
even
Mhm.
like, and not having your people in front of you all the time, like that's a whole nother
Mhm.
thing.
Oh gosh, yeah. I
Um,
mean, well, especially since our vocation's very much, how could I say it? Like just this people based and fed off of the spirit through people as well. And but yeah, it's a reset button is definitely the word for it. And also, I remember in the month of March itself, as February is coming to an end, and in the vocations office, here. So well, first before getting into that, just to broadly, kind of a broad breaststroke for everybody to understand what my office is. So, on the Office of Vocations, there's kind of a twofold aspect to it. On one side is the director of seminarians aspect, and then the other is the director of vocations. There. So the director of seminarians is basically overseeing all of them in the many different seminaries that they are at, and walking with them towards ordination. So that's a tier of what the vocation directors does. And then the other side is the vocational aspect, working with discerners. And my job particularly is working with those who are discerning the call to uh, priesthood, the diocesan priesthood there. But I also have a confrere of mine who works in the office, Joan Patton, who is much on the side of the religious realm there, with the women who are thinking of religious life, and even the men as well, who she was able to give resources to men and women who are in that understanding or discerning that call. So just kind of an umbrella on that too. But going back to what in that month of March I was talking about. I mean, like you were saying, I just saying yes to everything, and where I found myself on one side because it's evaluation season for the seminarians, so that entails a lot of travel, a lot of meetings, and sitting down. And so I had these meetings set up, and then all of a sudden it's also, a lot of vocations work too. So I was saying yes to all this stuff. Like the one thing, you look at your schedule like prior, you're like, oh, that day looks free, I'll lock it in, and all of a sudden it just all piles up. And then when 2 weeks or a week before, you're like, wait, what? Well, how did this happen? And
What did
so
I
I got to
do?
a point. Yeah, so I got to a point where I was like, oh man, this is quite a lot. And then all of a sudden, boom, this life hit, right, and this whole pandemic and everything, and it then things started to postpone, things started to cancel, left and right, and then I was left with really this time to just, like you were saying, slow down and really think of my own vocation and my own life and my own priesthood, and just seeing how am I able to carry out the Lord's will, but really having Him as the center and not myself. And so it's kind of like a centering thing. And I remember a couple of us were talking to, a couple of us priests, saying that that this was kind of a prolonged desert experience in a certain way, where Jesus kind of goes into the desert, and a lot of times we think of that as entering into retreat, as well, and where we are experiencing the great graces of God, but at the same time going into quote unquote battle with the evil one, as well. And so it was kind of like this prolonged desert, or time of reflection there as well. So just wanted to highlight that in your reflection with it.
I've been telling a lot of people that this, so unprecedented in our own lives as priests, in your life as people, that like to kind of be kind to yourself during this time too. It's like there's just going to be a lot of funky things, and we're just
Sure.
going to have to roll,
Right.
and especially when we have like had a life that was pretty, very structured in what we did, and
Hmm. Yeah.
this is a way that God's kind of being like, well, I'm going to kind of stir it up, and how can
Hmm.
God use this time, And it's just some things I've been thinking about. Full
Yeah.
disclosure, who is snoring in the background is my French bulldog, and just so if anybody is hearing that,
Sure.
she's belly up and she's snoring, taking
I
her
should bring
little.
my brother's pug in to do a little snoring contest between the two of them, see who's
Yes,
louder.
she's in her second mid morning nap. So, anyways, if that's what
Okay.
you hear, I'll try to filter it out. But
Yeah,
we'll
it's
do the
not me.
best.
It's
So
not me. Awesome.
today we celebrate Good Shepherd Sunday. It's always the fourth Sunday in the Easter season. As well, it's also the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. And that's why we invited on Father Brandon today to share with us some reflections on the Good Shepherd, and what that means to our call, our vocation to serve,
Right.
and to be people who go out and care for others. And I know, having a little animal now, I don't have my people in front of me, my sheep, as
Sure.
much anymore, but I have this little animal around that I have to like, yeah, care for her. And when she's in the backyard and she wants to go into a treacherous place or eat something that she's not supposed to, like having to correct that and having to bring her back into the safe places and things. And there's a little part of that where you're like, oh my gosh, that's like kind of what the Lord is talking about today. Like that He's the
Mm-hmm.
one who keeps us safe from those other things. And um, I think that the shepherd image is gentle and cute, and sheep are like fluffy and things. But like in reality, though, like the shepherd is like a really strong
Right.
person. The shepherd is somebody who loves fiercely, right? Loves his sheep in a crazy way, where it's like, I'm going to protect you and I'm going to care for you. I'm going to protect you from those thieves and those robbers, and I'm going to make you know that this is the way. I am the
Mm-hmm.
way, the gate, that you can come in and out of, and that like you got to, and if you know my voice, like you're not going to be distracted by the rest of those things. And the image today just is so rich. Is a reminder of what like my vocation is too as a priest, to protect my people. And sometimes we can just be like, yeah, whatever, they're in the world, they're doing their thing, if they come to me they do it. It's like, no, the shepherd goes out, like you said, right,
Mm-hmm.
goes out and
Right.
finds that one lost sheep. And so I always have to
Mm-hmm.
pray for that grace too, that I'm not just taking care of the ones who stayed in the sheep pen and who have been good little sheep, right, but the ones who
Right.
maybe
Right.
have strayed away to go and to seek them out too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
but yeah, what are some of the things on your heart today
Yeah.
about this good
Um,
shepherd?
yeah. Thank you, Father Tim. And like you said, there's so much that goes with this image, right? And there's just so many things that you can pull from it, and themes. And so, for me, I was immediately, as I was reflecting on the readings today too, because a lot of the imagery you speak of comes from, our readings, right? Where Jesus is speaking and saying, Amen, amen, I say to you, I am the gates of the sheep, the sheepfold. And so I was immediately taken back to our time at seminary. You had talked about at the beginning of our podcast that we've known each other for quite some time, and it's been such a blessing to be able to journey with you in that as well. And so we can definitely see us as the great fraternity and brothers, in this. And we went to the same seminary at St. Patrick's, and I was actually taken back to St. Patrick's in our chapel there. And if we had such a beautiful chapel there with all the different stained glass, and so I was actually drawn into the to reflect upon that stained glass window in the back there. And from what I remember, it was kind of an add-on, I think, to the rest of the stained glass, because the other stained glass windows have a time between the Old and the New Testament, the fulfillment and everything. In the back, it was more these images that represent seminary formation and everything. And so I think in and of itself, and not to be exclusive at all, I'm just saying that when the image of the Good Shepherd is a very priestly image, right? And so I look at it also as a reminder for all priests, today, to understand what that spiritual fatherhood, is. And so when I was thinking about that stained glass, I remember, I think it was every time we had night prayer on Sundays there, I would always sit in the back there, being a good Catholic, as I am, sitting in the back, and um, and I would sit there, and I was just drawn into the stained glass window that was either next to or adjacent to St. Charles Borromeo, who is the kind of founder of seminary and formation there. But I would always gaze upon that image of the Good Shepherd, and yeah, at first, like you said, the imagery itself is very gentle, right? He's like holding a lamb, he's caring for it, which is a portion of what the shepherd means. But you look into it deeper, and what the shepherd is, it's hard work, it's taxing, it's kind of rough, and it takes so much. Like if you read some of the history of shepherds, they weren't the most prestigious um, they weren't the most prestigious profession, either. And so there was a sense of this, hard work that goes in there, the sacrifice also that a priest has to make. And so, yeah, I just wanted to tie that into kind of that imagery of that spiritual fatherhood, of how that takes on. And I remember my last year there, Father Bud Stevens, who was our rector, he constantly centered his rector's conferences around spiritual fatherhood, right? And so just kind of reflecting upon that is today is really I think, a call for all priests to remind ourselves, what is our spiritual fatherhood? What does that really mean? Right. And that using that image of the Good Shepherd, of the sacrifices, that a shepherd makes, and the work that goes into that, the caring for the sheep, and even that means letting go of your own, pride, ego, want sometimes, and surrendering that. And that's kind of that's almost like family life, right? When another vocation, as we speak of, is that married vocation, right? When a woman and a man get married together, they're called to kind of to really sacrifice for one another and to work hard, for one another. So yeah, those are at least initially some of the imageries that I've really reflected upon, that today is kind of that um, you know renewal in a certain sense. And last thing I want to say, I know I'm kind of going on a monologue here, but I got again a lot of reflections, in this. But I kind of looked at in my reflection today was like a mini chrism in a certain way. So just why do I say that? Because if we think about the chrism mass itself, it's a celebration of the priesthood and the celebration of the church, right? And so at the chrism mass, what do priests do? They renew their promises to what we did at ordination. And so right after that is this beautiful blessing of the oils as well. And in Psalm 23, it talks about how, the Lord is our shepherd. And I think along there, it talks about how he anoints our heads with oil, there. And so just that also imagery came up in my mind. And so today, looking at it as, for me personally, and hopefully also a call out to other priests, as well, to renew their promises, taking this like a little mini chrism mass, and especially this year because we didn't have the in-person chrism mass there, watching it digitally and everything. But yeah, so just a couple couple thoughts and reflections that were just brewing in my mind, and so much to reflect upon, and so much to take home with us.
Yeah, it is sad that we really don't get that scripture of the rest of the year on Sundays in general. I mean, there's probably
Mm-hmm,
another time we do. I just am not
mm-hmm,
recalling, but
right.
it's so rich in that sense. It's
Mm-hmm,
an invitation too to reflect on that the crozier, right, that the bishop carries is a shepherd's staff,
sure.
right? There's those
Yeah.
two ends of it. It has the hoop on one end, right, the little
Yep.
hook. The hook
Yep.
is to gather. The hook is to draw them into places of safety, right? But the other end is like a stick to beat off, you know,
Mm-hmm,
the things that could harm the sheep. And I think
right.
that is like those kind of two ends of what it means to be a shepherd, right? Yeah, you do have to
Mm-hmm,
massage and bring them back and care for them and feed them and you know those kind of mentoring type roles, but then there is that protection. And so it's that both
right.
and always, as the Catholics are famous for.
Right.
I've been
Exactly.
reminded too in this time especially that like the priesthood of Jesus Christ in a sacramental way is of course reserved to the sacramental priesthood for us, you know. But like
Mm-hmm,
in a universal way, like
right.
his shepherding is being lived out in our parents right now.
Right.
Like
Right.
by their virtue of their baptism, they participate in this kingly office,
Mm-hmm,
right? And the kings are always shepherds in the Old Testament, like always a
mm-hmm,
connected piece. And
yeah.
so that's what it was. And I love when they went to go look for David. David was
Mm-hmm,
the one who was where? Where was he? He was out tending the sheep, right? The rest
mm,
of them, the rest of the
sure.
guys that he wanted them to choose, the dad wanted them to choose, were in there all cleaned up, right? And then
Right.
Samuel's like, not this one's, not these
Right.
ones. Where's the dirty
Sure.
one? Where's the one that knows what it means to go out there and work? Bring him.
Right.
And so it's just a call, I think, to the men out there right now, and just all people, the call to like live for others. You know, I think that that's really what
Mm-hmm,
the good shepherd's about. Like the bad
sure.
shepherd, Jesus says, is the one who goes and, you know, drinks the milk of the sheep and eats them for food and all those kind of things.
Right. Right.
Like we live in a
Sure.
world that consumes, right? And says, you know, what's in it for me? But the real call of vocation is to ask ourselves, like, how can I lay down my life so that you could have life? And
Mm-hmm,
that's the real.
right.
Those are the priests that we need.
Oh, totally.
We need
Yeah.
those priests right now. We need those parents right now. We need those religious now who say to themselves like, "Hey, man, I don't want to live for myself anymore.
Mm-hmm,
I want to live for others, and mostly I want to live
right.
for Jesus and to continue
Yeah.
on his
And to,
shepherding ministry."
yeah, and to, I mean, that was very beautiful, reflection there, Father Tim, and it made me think about how this whole season, right? And I don't think this Good Shepherd Sunday is placed in Easter by accident, right? And we know with God, there's no accidents, God incidences, as a lot of people say, and I don't think it's an accident because Easter is what, in its nature, is of course resurrection and life, but it's also baptismal, right? And talking about the baptismal call, baptismal priestly call that all of us have, by our baptism, and kind of going back to the imagery of oil as well. If we remember at our baptism, we're not only baptized with water, but we are also anointed, right on the crown of our heads, and it talks about how we are anointed as priest, prophet, and king, as Jesus was as well. And so, really, this Easter season is calling all of us to back to understanding what our baptismal call is, and even the work behind it. And again, going into the baptismal rite at the very beginning. When we ask the questions, as the priest begins the whole ritual, and we ask the questions to the parents and the godparents, right? There's the beautiful work that goes behind that. Is are you now ready to continue this life of faith and to help your child to know more of God? And I mean, I'm definitely paraphrasing there. I just can't remember the top of my head, but there's that kind of undertone that goes into it, right? And just going into what you're talking about is, even as parent, or just as a baptized community, as a baptized church, we're called to that mission, right? And I think that's the other side of baptism, is that not only are we taken into this community of faith, not only are we uh, cleansed of original sin, but we're also given a mission, to move forward by Christ. And so yeah, just wonderful food for thought. And then I think tying into that vocation, we speak of real ultimately, we I always use this in a lot of my own vocations talks, when I go to schools or confirmation groups or anything with vocations, I always draw us back to that Baltimore Catechism. Was the purpose of a Christian person, and is to know, love, and serve God. And so I think know, love, and serve, that's a general vocations, and it's always important to draw ourselves back to that, and to reflect upon that, really. So really today is also a call for all of us, I think, as you so elegantly put, is also for us to reflect on God's mission for us all as a priestly, kingly, and prophetic people there. So
And to own that, right? I think to
mhm,
like
mhm,
believe that that's in you by the virtue of your baptism. Like, oh,
mhm,
like
right.
even I just was having a conversation with the priest the other day. He was like, no, like teaching has to happen at the church. And I was like, no, like you don't realize that by the very virtue of their marriage and by the virtue that they had kids, like the Lord imbues them
Mhm,
with the virtue, with the actual charism of teaching. Like
yeah.
that's the whole point of the beginning of the baptismal rite, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
by the
yeah.
virtue of your parenthood, God has given you that already. In the way that you can do that. You're not going to give
Right.
your kid a master's degree in theology and they don't need it,
Right. Right. Right.
but you are going to give them and imbue in them and impregnate them with the values of faith,
Mhm. And
the
I think
values of the
that's something.
gospel.
Yeah, and I think that's really something to point out in this like conversation here, is encouragement for all people to own it, like you're saying, like to really understand that God has given you this power, not just another person or just depend on this other person. It's like, no, that's how wonderful God is. And actually, in a few weeks, we're going to be celebrating Pentecost, right? And so just reminding ourselves of that too, is not forgetting the power that God, and of course not abuse it, of course, or take it for granted, as well, but or take advantage of it, but to really understand that, hey, first of all, I'm worthy of this. God sees me as worthy of receiving this great gift and this great power, and owning that and accepting it, and to be able to bring that forward. Because I know a lot of times we can get um, discouraged, or we can even feel that we're not worthy as well of this, or how to do this, or there's no way I can do this. But we look at the saints, not all of them had theology degrees there. And I'm not saying that that's like not a good thing or whatever, but it's supplemental. But I think it's also important to understand that there are many ways God works through us as great, instruments as we are.
Amen.
Mm. Sure.
I want to
Amen.
thank you, Father Brandon, for joining us today. I know you got lots of stuff on this busy day. You're doing a little webcast later, right? Kind of
Yes,
for
doing a little
vocations.
Facebook Live event with a panel of different priests and nuns and seminarians, and so yeah, so it's
Go
gonna be a
check
lot
it
of
out.
fun.
What's your handle on Facebook?
OC Vocations. So
OC Vocations. So go check that
yeah,
out. Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Please,
Yeah.
please, and I invite everybody to come check it out, and it's gonna be fun having all of us there, and so yeah, so just go out there, give us a holler.
What time is that at today?
3
Live.
p.m.
3
3
p.m.
p.m.
All right. This will go
Yes.
up in a couple minutes here. It'll be up before 12, hopefully. So anyone who
Okay.
listens
So,
before then. But then it's also recorded. So you can go and I'm sure go
right.
on the OC Vocations and see the recorded live as well. So make sure you post that.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you, Father. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. It's nice to actually kind of step away and to reflect a little bit there. And
Right?
so thanks
Rather
for the
than just like in
opportunity.
this like creating mode, right? The whole time. Like, what's the next
Right,
thing? What's the next thing? Just to be
right,
like, no,
right,
Lord,
right.
thank you for like here and now, right now, we are
Mhm,
shepherds. We are
exactly.
participating in the kingly and priestly office of Christ,
Mhm,
and wherever we are, and to
yeah,
really take that grace today and to receive
yeah,
it and to own it. Let it take a
mhm,
deeper seat in your hearts. So,
yeah. Amen, brother.
well, thank you, and thank you all for joining us on home. God bless you.